A reading from the Gospel according to Luke. Now every year Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming that he was in the group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Look, your father and I have been searching for you in great anxiety." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother treasured all these things in her heart, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. The word of the Lord. Today, the holy day that we are remembering is the feast of Saint Joseph, the father of Jesus, or stepfather of Jesus, as you were, depending on your consideration of how this works. And the reading appointed for today, it's interesting if you look, the reading appointed for today actually doesn't have Joseph say one word, and he's only referred to in the statements that Mary talks about Jesus, and Jesus talks about Joseph to Mary. It's interesting we don't know a lot about what Joseph's experience as a parent was, but anybody who has been a parent, or anybody who has had a parent, knows that they can be complex. Even if you've had a really good relationship with a parent, it can be complex. And certainly not all of us have had good relationships with our parents. I do a lot of pastoral care for parents trying to make sense of who they are supposed to be to their children. I do a lot of pastoral care for children who are wondering who should they be to their parents. And one thing that is clear to me is that each of us is on a path of trying to figure out who God is calling us to be in this world. And that's particularly true of us as we are trying to figure out how to be parents, role models, caretakers, teachers for young ones that we have hopes for who they will grow up to be. And we all carry with us the stories of those who raised us, nurtured and taught and cared for us. The psychologist Murray Bowen years ago developed what's known as natural systems or family systems theory. One of the parts of that family systems work that he did is called the Multigenerational Transmission Process. It's a fancy phrase for saying the way that we carry our anxiety and function within a system as a parent to our children is often informed by the way that we were parented. It transmits through generations, usually in the form of us either doing exactly what we did when we were parented, or sometimes swinging the pendulum the other way and doing the opposite of how we were parented. But in all those cases, it's an attempt to deal with the complexity of being a human being who is in charge of the care of another human being. I can only imagine that as Jesus and Joseph were figuring out how they related to each other, it had to be complex. And yet what we do know of Joseph, what little we do have of him, is that clearly he was a very faithful person. That in the midst of the complexity of what it must have been like, not just to raise a son, but to raise the Son of God, the Messiah, that Joseph was faithful and did the best he could. And I'm sure there were some times he got it wrong, as we all do. But at the end of the day, we see who Jesus turned out to be. And whether that's because he was God incarnate, or because of how he was raised by his father/stepfather Joseph, we should take the time to give some thanks and honor that role that Joseph played in Jesus' story. And we can only pray that as we deal with our own multi-generational transmission process of taking how we were parented and transmitting that to how we parent, we can take the time to be prayerful. We can take the time to thank God and pray to God, help us to know how we can be the best people we're called to be for those in our care. Help us to know who you want us to be in this process so that we can do the best job we can nurturing another generation, setting them off on a good place for the generation after them and the generation after them, so that at the end of the day, we will have done our part for the great human family, Jesus, God's family. So we remember Joseph on this day, and we're mindful of how we're called to live as Josephs, as parents, as caregivers in our own lives. Amen.